I feel very strongly that my angel connection is not necessarily rational, nor is it emotional. It is a connection which is connecting me to the divine hierarchy through the context of my imagination. And to me, that is the most powerful thing that I can think of. Because my imagination is my connection to the divine hierarchy. And Yeshua spoke about it almost at every breath. How do we connect ourselves to the divine except through our imagination? There is not a physical connection that can be understood. It's not an emotional connection. It's a connection of imagination. And that is the experience that I had with my angel as a young man. It was an experience of feeling beautiful, of being in the presence of my angel, as an experience beyond emotion, beyond rational thinking, that enveloped me, and I felt beautiful. And that has been the thing that I have come back to time and time again in my own life. Sometimes I am an unwilling participant in that quest, but nevertheless, I come back to it. And I'm suggesting that you join me in this journey of imagination and the connection to the divine hierarchy and the experience that comes from that encounter. So I have thought for many, many years, decades of my encounter, and I am left with an emotional response of a kind, but I am more awestruck by the moment and beyond my own emotional understanding. And I find that to be incredibly comforting. And when I have gotten myself all mixed up, it's because I have experienced and allowed myself to settle for less. In other words, a failure of my own imagination, a failure to take advantage of the connection that I have with the divine hierarchy. It is, as I can understand it, everything that Yeshua talked about. And his life was summated by the experience of sharing his imagination with his disciples in the form of the Grail moment. And I think that, with beyond any shadow of a doubt in my own understanding, the Grail experience was an experience of the cup of imagination. It just seems like it cannot be any other way. And that cup of imagination occurs in the context of flesh and blood. And he was saying to me that if you want to have this connection, you're going to have to engage yourself on a different level. You're going to enter into the connection with the divine hierarchy that is beyond your flesh and blood. You're going to have to give that up. You're going to have to assume an imaginal body that is a flesh and blood of a different kind. Now, I don't know how to describe that, but it seems that way to me. It feels that way. And when I've gotten in the most trouble, gotten myself turned around, is when I have departed from the imaginal world, the world of imagination, into the world of fantasy, where my physical body, as it arrived at my birth, and I arrived at my birth in that body, begins to dominate. And that's where my imagination fails and my fantasy world begins. And in that fantasy world, there's just nothing but trouble. It is a disappointment on every level, regardless of the promises made. And I think that's the point of my meditation for today, is that we have to begin to look beyond our own body, the needs of our own body, the needs of our own emotional content, to find a different understanding of body, a subtle body, a resurrected body, and an imaginal connection to the divine hierarchy, which is, in a sense, a connection to the mind of God and also to the memory of God. So these things are spoken of continuously, and there are lots of ways to kind of understand it. But for me, this most simple way is that my meditations now are really about the imaginal world, the creative world, in the sense of it's not fantasy that I'm working on, it's an imaginal connection. It's how to bring another kind of understanding into manifestation. That seems to be the most key point. What am I going to manifest? And will what I manifest serve me? And sometimes what I manifest does not serve me. And so then I have to go into the world of negation, and I have to say no. That manifestation is not helpful to me. It doesn't further. And so I have to say no to that. I have to say, well, no, I'm not going to manifest that anymore. That doesn't work. And that's where the work really begins, is in the reconstruction, the remanifestation of my own imagination in the context of my responsibility, my obligation, my job in the divine hierarchy. So I do have a place in the divine hierarchy. I have a job to do. I have a calling. And when I'm true to that calling, my imagination just absolutely bursts forth. And man, that feels good. It is an aliveness which I find the most pleasurable. So I want to go beyond the questions of what do I believe and what are my doctrines and dogma and who am I reading and what's going on, and to begin to think of it in a more pure way is to decide what it is that serves me and what it is that does not. And all of us, I think, can find that. We can find ways to fantasize about who we are. And then we can, if we're lucky, reject that, negate that, say no, and refocus our attentions on our connection to the divine through our imagination. It is the spark of new. It is the progress of the cosmos in its most sublime way. It is being connected to that. So it doesn't necessarily find itself in a rational understanding. In fact, it's almost just the opposite. It is the imaginal world which we enter into and then we make manifest by saying yes. Yes, say yes. And I sit here and I am saying yes in the context of this, and I feel good about it. There's a lot of trials ahead in my life and in the life of humanity on this planet. We are about to enter into a very rigorous stage of the development of humanity, where a lot of the things that we thought would work won't, and we have to reimagine ourselves as nations and understand also that the nations have angels. So if you want to get some contrast, you can look at the globalized world or the world of nations ruled over by the angels or guided by angels. That seems to be so much more the fun thing, the best thing. The machinations of a globalized world are not as interesting as paying attention to the angels of the nations. And they are there. And so the egregores that are created, the egregores are spiritual entities that are not beings. And we see it all over the world as these egregores absorb an enormous amount of energy and become larger and larger, and they course through humanity in ways that are just horrifying, really. So it's saying no to the egregore, the creations of our fantasy, and the energies that they consume, and saying, oh no, these are fantastical creations that absorb enormous amounts of energy and cause endless amounts of distress to the creatures of this earth. So it's time to, in my mind, say no to that and connect by our imagination to the divine, to begin to drink of the Grail, the cup of imagination. Amen.